Good afternoon, FairCon 2020. Again, my name is Luke Bader, and I'm Director of Membership and Programs at the FAIR Institute. And I would personally like to thank everybody for attending the event this year. It's been so awesome to watch the community grow so rapidly every year and meet all of our new members. And as we continue to grow, we're going to be over 10,000 members by the end of 2020. And I really look forward to seeing all the work that you all do for the community and that you will continue to produce for the benefit of the community. So thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to have and to host the 2020 FAIR Awards ceremony, honoring the best in our community. The FAIR Excellence Awards honor risk management leaders for their initiative, ingenuity, and contributions to information and cybersecurity and operational risk management through the use and advocacy of FAIR, the international standard for quantifying risk in financial terms. The award recognizes the deep impact that these professionals have on their organizations in enabling operational excellence and effective decision-making, and in balancing the need to protect their organizations while running the business. This year, we are recognizing winners in 3 categories: the Business Innovator Award, the FAIR Champion Award, and the FAIR Ambassador Award. Nominations for these awards have been reviewed, and the winners were selected by a panel of independent Institute member judges. So first is the Business Innovator Award, which recognizes innovative risk officers who successfully apply FAIR principles to disrupt the status quo by leveraging new risk analytic capabilities. The winner this year is Emery Sulak. Emery has built an innovative cyber risk management methodology at the Department of Energy, DOE, that integrates FAIR and quantitative risk assessment practices with federally mandated controls and risk management frameworks such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the NIST CSF Framework for Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity, the Federal Information Security Modernization Act, FISMA, the Risk Management Framework, and the Department's approach to executing NIST Special Publication 800-37. Emory is also known as a strong promoter for innovation in the federal government, having shared the new DOE methodology with other agencies, as well as the Federal CISO Council at OMB. Emory has been crucial in influencing the development of a government-specific FAIR fundamentals training course. Emory is a key contributor to the discussion on how to leverage FAIR principles in the US federal government through attendance and participation at both the DC and federal government local chapters, and as well as the annual FAIR conference. The other finalists for the Business Innovator Award this year, in addition to Emory, were Steve Pearson, Chief Information Security Officer at Cambia Health, who has elevated Cambia's HIPAA compliance and risk management through the use of FAIR so that the compliance doesn't have to be managed at the expense of risk. And Rob LeBay, Director of Information Security at Tech Resources Limited, who is applying FAIR analyses to assess new digital risks, such as those associated with operating driverless trucks in mining. So congratulations again to the nominees, and congratulations to Emory. Next is the FAIR Champion Award, which recognizes leaders at the forefront of their organization's FAIR initiative, who get data owners on board, stakeholders to help improve analysis, and decision makers to adopt the resulting analytics as an integral part of the strategies, decision-making processes, and operating rhythms. The winner this year is Harold Marcenaro from BCP. Harold leads the digital risk management team at Banco de Crédito del Peru, also known as BCP, the largest bank in the country, on a mission to empower the organization to identify, quantify, prioritize, treat, and communicate cyber risks to enable well-informed decisions and cost-effective resource prioritization. As the bank engaged in strategic digital transformation with the launch of a new online banking service, Harold championed the use of FAIR to make sure that critical cybersecurity risks would be identified and treated, and that the board of directors gets full visibility into those risks and the associated security strategies and better exercises in its oversight responsibilities. Harold is currently championing the expansion of the use of FAIR beyond analytics of cybersecurity risk to other areas in operational risk within the bank. He was a presenter at this year's FairCon 2020 on the topic of managing digital risks in the time of crisis. Our other finalists for the FAIR Champion Award this year were Latrell Maddox, Strategy Risk Manager from Cisco, who's been leading the FAIR Cyber Risk Quantification Program at Cisco, and Christopher Porter, Chief Information Security Officer from Fannie Mae, who has led the transformation of the cybersecurity risk culture and related decision-making practices at Fannie Mae. Congratulations to all of our nominees, but special congratulations to Harold. So let's hear from him now.
Thank you, Luke, for this recognition. It's a great honor. And I take it as a recognition to my whole team, in particular Squad Estonia, which is on this mission to quantify risks and make more decisions more effectively. I'll be happy to continue contributing to expand fair use any way I can. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Harold, and again, congratulations. The final award today is the Fair Ambassador Award, which recognizes a specific member's work in bringing fair knowledge and the Fair Institute to the wider community. Our winner this year is Tony Martin Veggie, who currently leads the risk program at Netflix, has been a tireless advocate of FAIR for years, even before it was fashionable, and can be rightfully considered one of the pioneering animators of the FAIR community. An early adopter of FAIR, he founded the San Francisco Bay Area chapter, of which he is currently the co-chair, and generously shared his experience with the fast-growing FAIR community with inspiring and practical applications of FAIR, which inspired many risk professionals to follow his lead. Tony continues to share his FAIR knowledge and experience at events like FairCon or CIRICon. He has also been embracing a digital presence for years through social media, on webinars, and by maintaining his own website with quantitative risk resources, and that's www.tonym-v.com. So congratulations to Tony. Let's hear from him now.
Wow, I am so surprised and honored to win the FAIR Ambassador Award. It's deeply meaningful to me because I truly feel like FAIR is the path of the future for companies trying to make better strategic decisions. FAIR enables efficient decision-making, better allocation of resources like people, time, and money, and we just have a bright future ahead of us. If I look back at how far we've come, it truly is amazing in the last 10 plus years. And I am so excited to see where we take this in the future. So I want to thank the FAIR Institute first and foremost for nominating and voting for me, and also just for your continued partnership throughout the years. And probably most importantly, I want to thank everybody at RiskLens. RiskLens has been a really important business partner to me, both at my current job at Netflix and also several companies in the past in which I've built FAIR programs. And I wouldn't be where I'm at without your mentorship, your partnership, your knowledge, and your friendship. So thank you, FAIR Institute, RiskLens, all FairCon attendees. I hope you enjoy the rest of FairCon.
Thank you, Tony, and congratulations to all of our finalists and our winners this year. We're really proud and we're very thankful for all the work that you do giving back to the FAIR Institute community. Appreciate it and keep on going. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sounil Yu, FAIR Institute board member, to introduce our closing keynote.
Thank you, Luke, and congratulations to all of the FAIR Award winners and finalists. Hello, everyone. My name is Sounil Yu, and I'm very happy to introduce FairCon 2020's closing keynote. I'm a member of the FAIR Institute Board of Advisors, so on behalf of the entire Institute leadership, thank you very much for attending FairCon 2020 and this closing keynote. I really hope that you've enjoyed the virtual conference this year, hearing about all the progress made in the community. This is exciting because there have been so many new and better examples of using FAIR and risk quantification to make better business decisions. To close out our conference this year and provide a perspective of what's to come, we're delighted to have Gartner present their perspectives on upcoming industry trends. In this presentation, you'll hear about the work that Gartner is doing with so many industry leaders and how they see the industry changing over the next few years. It is now my honor to introduce our speaker today, Khushbu Pratap. She is the research director within Gartner's Adaptive Resilience, Trust, and Risk Group. Khushbu leads Gartner's cyber and IT risk management research and coaches C-suite executives in designing fit-to-purpose risk management operating models. Her focus and interests are in organizations' risk expression journey and the application of quantitative risk models to digital environments. By researching these journeys and combining her consulting and audit experience, she's able to speak to how we can simplify and scale risk decision-making. She's well-traveled, having lived and worked in 5 countries, and offers culturally relevant insights to risk leaders. She's a recognized speaker at Gartner and industry events and known for invoking purpose and action in risk strategy. Her pandemic mantra is create a communications rhythm. Please remember to engage us in the chat during the session by asking questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Khushbu.
Thank you, Sounil. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I know it's the second day in consecutive days to be listening into experts' experiences and lots of good insights. So I'm here today to share my experiences with that of Gartner members and with non-members that I have been accumulating for a good past 1 year and continue to do so. It's been an interesting journey for me so far, and as I launch into a different kind of era with respect to how we look at risk now and 2021 and beyond, we recognize that most people who are calling us find themselves very analogous to being in a subway station where trains are constantly changing. Schedules aren't there. They possibly aren't updated. And in times of the pandemic, sometimes the subway stations aren't even working. So there are decisions that they have to make in terms of what kind of challenges to pick, which path to take, and also where to invest whatever is left. In doing so, today's conversation, I want to focus on the areas in which could be the drivers for your decision making, as well as where to recast your risk management priorities. For that, I would like to draw your attention to what I would call as some of the specific areas within technology risk, as well as information risk, resilience, as well as trust management. Now, when you look at these areas, we are very prone to thinking about drivers of risk and what are the deterrents as well as the inhibitors of decision making. I would like for you to think slightly differently today. Now, when we think about this nice picture that I have, when you look at the center, which is the dark blue foundation of everything that brings about trust, the areas that are primarily responsible for trust are leadership, culture, and the people. The areas that are primarily responsible for some form of consistency are infrastructure and process. And the things that shake up all of these is that light blue ring that you see outside, which is a result of simply doing what you do as an organization. You find yourself in an interconnected environment, in a very agile space, and also in a space where expectations are changing all the time. Now, whether we speak about the context of the pandemic now, and we think about the changes that are ensuing, not only next year, but also beyond, it is bound to be understood that this ring that we have over here, which calls out the volume, variety, velocity, and the value of decisions, the exposure of information, the exposure of your interconnectedness with other people and organization. When you think about these, you are expected to think about how you're going to start prioritizing and where to look. So in terms of where to look, my mantra, which is communication rhythm, is to ask you to take yourself in a place where you have a goal, and that goal should be winning in the turns. So I asked you to imagine yourself as someone trying to make decisions. And I also told you that most Gartner members feel like they're at a subway station where sometimes the subways are not working, the schedules are changing, information is not available, and it looks very chaotic right now. And it is. But I am going to equip you today with some of the drivers that I'm seeing, some of the solutions that we are seeing are beginning to work, and some of the areas in which that you need to pay more attention as opposed to the people that you're working with. So giving you the ability to win in this one turn versus the next very many few turns that are coming is the idea of today's conversation. So in the face of uncertainty, the top risks that we are seeing 2020 and beyond are undoubtedly the one where you're trying to have a consistent continuity strategy, and also the one where not only one VCM team or one set of representatives from senior executive management are coming together, but it's a consolidated strategy of all business leaders coming together. The conversations I've been having in the past 7 months have been resounding of the new highway of meetings that has been created. So you have this highway to the CEO, the highway to the COO. You can pick up the phone and get to them immediately because everyone is in sort of, you know, now the pseudo panic mode where whatever is going wrong, they're all ears to know about it, and they're all ears to act on it. They're all ears to start creating proactive actions and allocating resources in the right place. And they are now attuned to reprioritizing what they had on their agenda in near real time. It's the kind of crisis situation which is going to get, I would say, repeated, and it's going to stay here in this state for some time. Trust me when I say that the situation that we are in, we might call it a crisis at the start, but we're soon going to get used to the way of access that we have with senior executives, with supply chain leaders, with your business partners, as well as your customers who you did not have as much access to in the past. So the 2020 and beyond is going to open up a very big range of exposures. And that exposure is going to include financial backstops. It's also going to include third parties and knowing where the third parties can support you and cannot support you, including regulatory obligation management. These exposures are going to key in their targeted phishing attacks on senior executive management, board members, and key investors. There's also a geopolitical uncertainty. There have been more than a dozen conversations regarding the general high levels of anxiety over at least the US elections, the oncoming crystallization of Brexit, as well as several other geopolitical changes that are occurring and are impending, are going to start creating ripple effects into your daily lives that you cannot see clearly right now. And last but not the least, we do see the impending change of irreversible climate change also impacting you, no matter where or what type of organization you are. So there is a variety of these impending risk drivers that are now becoming top of mind for the majority of our Gartner readership. And they're slowly bringing these in front of us in the order that you see on this slide. Now, as we look at what they're going to do about these risk exposures in terms of investment in technology, in the past, we have seen a very steady growth for investment in IT operational technology, in supply chain technology, in operations management only, as well as in privacy management, as well as in operational risk and identity and access management. So all these light blue bars that you see here, as against the past 3 years, we have seen a significant uptick in procurement patterns, so that you know where your peers are putting their money in terms of automation. Right at the back of that procurement pattern, what I'd also like to bring to your notice is the hype cycle for risk management. Now, a hype cycle is where Gartner loves plotting concepts and technologies against where these are in terms of its demand, in terms of realistically meeting the buyer's needs, as well as knowing how many years before is this concept or technology going to mature and plateau or probably even become obsolete. So you will see this nice little pattern of different technologies and processes plotted on the the peak of inflated expectations, as well as some of the more mature technologies, many of which you might be already using, close to the slope of enlightenment, and which will then reach the plateau of productivity, where these solutions can get any better once they're on the absolute end of the hype cycle. But before that, they are going through this own life cycle of its own in terms of maturing, recognizing buyer demand, and adjusting and refining what it can bring to the market. So there are several capabilities that most risk management leaders are asking us about, and those include breach and attack simulation tools, especially in times of validating your extended operating environment during the pandemic. We are also seeing, no doubt, the reason why you're here, which is risk quantification implementations, exercises, and initiatives. We're also seeing a very high demand for trying to understand, in its plain, simple English language, IT risk appetite statements with respect to how do you understand what your business unit level, what your business process level, versus what your enterprise level appetite could be during risk decisions. A variety of privacy impact assessments are also part of what we are seeing closer to the inflated expectations in terms of hype, but the more mature capabilities are closer to that of hazard and threat intelligence, crisis management, as well as cloud access security brokers, as well as IT risk management solutions. Now, when we're looking at all of these technologies, there is this one question that I always ask myself, and I encourage different Gartner members to ask themselves as well, is that, do you really know where to focus effort as risk leaders in your organization? And if you think that the answer is yes, what I'm about to show you is a kind of a reflection of what many members shared with us. It may be true for you, maybe not. It's a very good, reference checking exercise in terms of where you and your team are and what changes you might need to make in your existing approach. So number one thing we more noticed is that when we went out to survey business leaders, not assurance function, business leaders, we went out to survey the business leaders and asked them a bunch of questions about risk. And we asked the same questions to the risk assurance teams. And here are the areas where they differed. These are the areas where we identified observable differentiation. So the most important one that I want to tell you today is that most business leaders do not have a lot of clarity on creating risk analytics at their business unit level. They do not know who is accountable for creating those analytics, and they do not necessarily know also how to set risk tolerance levels for their business unit. They don't know who is responsible. So the people who said that they didn't know or they did not necessarily have confidence in who was doing that made up for more than 1/3 of the respondent profile. So is that the same in your organization? Do you have more confidence about risk appetite and risk tolerance and day-to-day risk tracking as against the business unit leader? And if you both are on the same page, are you both agreeing? Those are the kind of questions I would like for you to ask yourself today so that you can identify your own action items for Monday. The other thing that was noteworthy for us was visibility over risks. We recognized about 37% of the business leaders told us there was no visibility on day-to-day risks that they were accepting and the day-to-day risks that were coming up. So there wasn't visibility in, let's say, identification, in tracking, and knowing what was decided on a day-to-day basis. And that's a big deal for business unit leaders, especially operationally. You make decisions, and then there are implications in terms of everything else that the assurance leaders tend to track and the business leaders feel stumped about. So I would highly recommend checking on that. Now, the other question I want to ask you to ask yourselves is, do you agree with your business counterparts? How are you thinking about some concepts that you take to them, and what do they do with it? So in the same survey, we asked about the usage of the 3 lines of defense model. I know many of you are fans. Many of you may be using it, and many of you in my analysis possibly align and would like it, but the reality looks different on the ground for you. So what we recognized was that business unit leaders, as you can see onto the right side of this slide, they said we do not use a specific framework for aligning to risk management decisions. We don't necessarily organize ourselves according to a framework to manage risks. Whereas the assurance folks, that is risk compliance, including security, including parts of legal, all of them together said, a resounding 58, almost 60% said, yeah, totally, we do this. We align ourselves with the 3 lines of defense model. Now, clearly, we are all aware that the Institute of Internal Auditors recently updated their guidance about the lines of defense, and they are now calling it more attuned to how you might want to organize yourself in principle rather than organization structures. However, that update hasn't made big dent in the way in which most organizations operate at the ground level. We see a very heightened and articulate 1.5 lines and 2.5 lines operate on the ground. So this is a very big disconnect in terms of how you or most assurance functions organize themselves in their minds versus how business leaders perceive the organization in their own minds. The other piece is very interesting, I'm sure, is that we asked questions about risk quantification and the drivers for quantification. The first is the business leaders' responses. So on this slide, you will see only what the business leaders said. And majority of them said that they agree that quantification is useful in communicating risk impacts to in business terms. And the next, they said that yes, it's also useful for communicating to the board. The last from third said that they want to make defensible risk decisions. And from what we had expected as Gartner, a sizable number, 17%, totally also said that it was not a good time to do quantification right now for multiple reasons. And when we pair this up with assurance leaders, so now on this slide, you see the comparison of both assurance and business units. And the variation really is that they're both agreeing in most cases, but for the most part, we recognize in our inquiry that business unit leaders are driven primarily by the fact that they want to make a defensible decision. And assurance leaders are driven by the fact that they need to report something defensible to the board. So it also depends on where they are in the organization. But a recent webinar we conducted on the same topic, the respondents were very clear that they were more interested in defensible decisions, and communication to the board came secondary, because if they weren't convinced about how defensible the decision was, it was difficult to even communicate it to the board. And of the 17% that said that quantification is not justified at this time, they recognized that it was too cumbersome to sift through the information that they already had, or the fact that they did not have the requisite information and the resources to get that information to launch a quantification exercise. So we see these very flavors of how most organizations want to start their quantification journey. Now, I've spoken about quantification. Gartner stands on the definition of quantification as simply a way to make sure that there are business terms and that you are communicating in those business terms. Those business terms help you identify the exposures of being in an interconnected environment, which is what we call a digital ecosystem. And those exposures are incumbent to the way in which you operate as an organization. So if you're a government organization, your promises to your stakeholders, your service beneficiaries, citizens, is your primary goal, is your primary promise. And as a corporate, depending upon what you choose as your mission and vision, your revenue numbers, your corporate social responsibility initiatives, your responsibility towards your own employees, whatever order you choose for that to be in, are the business terms that you want to express these exposures in. It's not always possible to do this in currency value terms. However, since currency value terms is the most sought after value, Gartner does recognize that there are some minimum elements of a quantification solution. And as you can see on these slides, we have recognized that this minimum element is incomplete without a loss event database. It's incomplete without a current risk assessment. It's also incomplete without a mathematical model or some kind of logic, some kind of algorithm, which intuitively does run the numbers for you, because you're trying to create these decisions based on the scale of information that you are consolidating. And most importantly, we also recognize that if you do all of the things which are in the bottom hexagons, and if you do not do the things on the top, which is business logic, know your business model, and know the industry nuance that you have or you are in, it becomes very difficult to start transposing what you learn from maybe a financial institution or an insurance company in terms of quantification and apply it to your business unit, apply it to your unique situation. So you could be a federated enterprise, you could be an enterprise which has multiple subsidiaries, you could be an enterprise or a government organization with a shared services situation. There have to be ways in which you need to recognize what your model is and how you make decisions in that model. Most importantly, the purpose for your quantification exercise should be identified early on. Meaning, do you want to do the quantification because you want to give yourself some sense of sanity that your subjective decision making is in the right direction? Indicatively, you're in the right direction. Or do you want to have some form of analysis aligned to the way in which you're doing your current posture assessment? Are you trying to figure out how much cyber insurance to buy and negotiate for the next year? Are you trying to figure out what to modernize and how much to invest in the modernization effort? Or are you trying to figure out how to optimize your vendor roster right now? How do you do the consolidation, especially in times of cost optimization initiatives? So the intended reason, the purpose of quantification has to be determined before you start quantification. Don't assume that quantification is a panacea for knowing and taking better decisions as a blanket exercise. Now, we also want to recognize the fact that the mistakes of those who came before you, meaning those who have already tried quantification, have many a times taken quantification in isolation. They have not understood the bigger activity, the minimum essential components of the larger risk management life cycle, of the larger components of a foundational exercise, a program, which lends itself to not only decisions, but it lends itself to knowing that you're running a good function. And to that effect, the output of any expression, and I call like I've said earlier, quantification, a form of expressing risk, it has to stand the test of having your narrative be valid for the time beyond when you've stood in front of a board member or where your work has been presented to a board member. With that in mind, the minimum components of any risk management exercise, and this is not a cycle, so please do not confuse it for sequence. These are simply minimum elements. You have to use communication, which is the top left hexagon, in consort with the treatment decision, in consort with how much you're aggregating in terms of data. So be mindful of the assumptions that are being taken when you try to communicate something about top 5 risks. You are doing this in tandem with the fact that you are continuously monitoring a risk. A risk doesn't just show up, and you don't do a portfolio assessment just because it shows up. You have a plan, you have a strategy, you're hoping to merge with an organization, or you're planning to change the way in which you go to market for a specific product, or the way in which organizations can connect back to you in terms of servicing requests. Whatever be the use case, you are trying to identify a different way, a new way of doing something. And as the assurance function, you have to be shoulder to shoulder with the business to try and understand where the buck really stops. You cannot be thinking about, here is my 200 lists of risk records in my risk register, and I have parked another 500. And now from amongst these, based on my crown jewel analysis, I'm going to figure out which is the most important one to focus on. It's not going to work right now. It's not going to work in 2021 and beyond, because everyone's eyes are straight and focused on business resilience, on growth, and innovative ways of coping with the current and future times. So here's a sample of how you start. I come from the security and risk world, so I bring you an example from there. But yeah, you have to start with an outcome. The outcome is that by 2025, we want to create a new digital delivery channel through a mobile application for a business unit. That being the outcome, you're trying to create focus into a business process and now trying to assess the risk of going digital, creating a new mobile application, creating the business and functional processes of how that interaction will take place between multiple internal stakeholders, the customer, as well as your vendor partners. And then identify after the people, the technology piece of it, as well as then figure out what your individual risk exposures will be for those areas. Now, in doing that, we recognize that most people from within a risk approach, a style of risk management, they are in the center of this diagram here, which is a very control-oriented approach. You make decisions depending upon policies, standards, and directives that have been already defined. But you have to now start moving towards the outer concentric circles of this diagram and make that a habit, not only for yourselves, but also for the people who partake in the risk assessment exercise. So you have to create a more outcome-based exercise, like I showed in the previous slide, and it has to gradually move towards something where you are able to make decisions on the fly. So key takeaways for you. These are the things that you would want to reflect on starting next week and try to answer some of the key questions that you asked yourselves up till now and be able to identify where you want to place your energies, knowing that these are the changes that are coming in the future. So just 2 more slides, I promise. Number 1 is the way in which you're going to automate risk management workflows. So for the longest time, it has been very manual. It has been very input oriented. You see a dashboard based on what information you have or your team has manually input in. It's a system of record. So most risk management solutions. Give it whatever name you want. Give it GRC, give it IRM, call it risk management, call it another name, but essentially a system where you are consolidating all of your risk activities. That has been primarily a system of record so far. Going forward, it's going to start becoming and should become a decision support system. So ask yourself, if it's not already that, how you can create a pathway to getting there. Programs are going to start learning from your past actions. And if they're not already doing that, you've got to figure out a way to allow it to do. And if you don't have the capability, you have to start looking for those capabilities. Programs should be able to serve up treatment suggestions and not just act as input-output data stores. These are not databases. These are risk management solutions of tomorrow, which are far more intelligent. And the last key takeaway I have for you is that risk decisions are going to be both individual and shared responsibilities. So the decision windows are going to collapse to less than half the time that you are used to seeing right now, which is what we are already seeing. Changing the decision in near real time is going to become the new normal. So you make a decision today, within less than a week, you're going to have to revisit the decision because something has already changed on the ground. Right. So with that, I will hand it over back to Sounil.
Thank you so much, Khushbu, for that great presentation with many concrete takeaways for us to all work with as we bring this information back to our companies. So now, on behalf of the FAIR Institute leadership, I'm proud to close the 2020 FAIR Conference. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for their contributions, thought leadership, and commitment to the FAIR Institute. And another thank you to our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. First, our technical advisor, RiskLens. Second, our FAIR Institute sponsors, Protiviti, RiskRecon, Cisco, and CyberVista. And last but not least, our FairCon sponsors, IBM, NormShield, Booz Allen Hamilton, ISSA, and the CyberWire. As a reminder, all of the conference sessions will be on the platform for the next 30 days for you to watch or rewatch in case you missed anything over the past 2 days. Following that, we'll be posting blogs on each session, so subscribe to the FAIR Institute blog to stay up to date with all of our activities. And with that, thank you for coming to FairCon 2020, and we will see you hopefully in person all next year.